Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you've had a great Data and AI Summit so far, and we're not done yet. We have a great session planned for you today around resilient supply chains with data and AI. Speed and agility are critical in consumer-facing industries. It's no longer just individual companies competing, but rather supply chains racing to deliver the freshest products, the best experience, and the best service to our customers. Yet, despite massive investments in data and AI, many organizations still struggle to turn pilot projects into real business value. My name is Usman Zubair, and I'm a lead architect at Databricks running our enterprise strategy practice. And over the next 40 minutes, we'll explore how SAP and Databricks are partnering to break down data silos, automate decision-making, and drive end-to-end supply chain transformation. So first, I'll have Andy come up, who's our Global Vice President of Supply Chain Management at SAP, who will share how SAP is modernizing the supply chain processes and challenges and taking the challenges head on. And then I'll come on once again, and I'll talk about how data plays a critical role in organizations modernizing their supply chain processes. And finally, we'll have an exciting fireside chat with Fitzgerald, Chief Data Officer at Danone, and she's going to share real-world examples of how she's using data and AI and Danone's using data and AI to transform their supply chain processes. So Andy, with that, let's get started.
Thank you very much. I got the short straw on the microphone, but first of all, I want to say congratulations. You made it. You're here. I very much appreciate it. You are now my best friends. So what I want to do over the next 10 minutes or so is really talk about supply chain strategy and where the opportunity lies with the collaboration between SAP and Databricks. So if we start off with where most people are trying to get to is efficiency. And what that means is really transferring those paper-based processes into a digital medium. Once you start to create those elements, you can then have the ability to allow data-driven business processes, and you can then move towards a resilient supply chain. Now, we all know during COVID, we saw the shortages of toilet roll. We saw beverage companies building, changing their product portfolio into hand sanitizer. We saw customers of ours rationalize their SKUs because whole areas of their business were eliminated overnight. So think of the restaurant industry for a start off. So when we move from the efficiency into a resilient, the issue is that everybody has gone belts and braces with the way that they've done their supply chain. And when you become resilient, you also become very rigid in the way that you actually apply your processes. And you get into, and what we're trying to do now is really break that mold and have an element of agility associated with your supply chain. And this is where we start to see the influx of data, AI, agents, digital assistants, all start to come into the business. And the way you actually approach your processes is with hindsight and from your past information being brought to you, but also bringing in information from outside of the SAP world. Now, there was a very famous quote done by Ayrton Senna. So I'm a Formula One fanatic, and in his statement, he said, you know, it is very difficult to overtake when the conditions are perfect. When the tarmac is dry, everybody has the same performance. It's very, very difficult. But when it's raining, there are plenty of opportunities. So when we see things like COVID, we see the tariffs going on at the moment, when there is volatility in the marketplace, that's when market share and first leader advantage takes place. And we start to see a shift in the way that supply chains are actually executed. I mean, I think Harvard is actually tracking all of the tariffs at the moment, and I think there are 60 different individual entries into their list now of where the tariffs have moved up and down. And I believe this morning, China has just come down to 55. And if you haven't got that adoption, that agility in your supply chain, then it becomes a bit of an issue to actually react to those spaces. So once we've got past that, we're really aiming towards an autonomous or an orchestration of your supply chain. So really being able to look at it from above and delve down into the different business units that you may have in order to then make the proper decision on the way, whether or not I reroute a particular order or I hold back a production order because I have a higher priority element to it. So then when we think about it, chief supply chain officers have really just got three main areas that they're looking at. You know, transparency. Whenever you see any type of survey done in this particular area, I need more visibility of what's going on in my business. And that means I need to understand the data that's moving around my organization, and then I need to be able to act on it. We're also seeing how do I introduce innovation into the space? How do I bring in agents into this area? And how do I look at that chase towards carbon zero and sustainability goals that I have? Now, as I mentioned, you know, with agility and resilience, now Gartner, if anybody subscribes to it, they talk about anti-fragility, which is bring in an element of instability into your supply chains to be able to be reactive in a meaningful time, rather than waiting months for events to actually occur to then act on it. And we see very much like in the aviation or area, the most modern fighter jets can't actually fly without having computer control, because in order to eke out that last bit of performance, they need to have that element of instability. And then, you know, with all of the AI elements that we've got going on, we're really talking about, you know, can I improve productivity? Can I improve my speed to market? Can I reduce unnecessary wait times throughout or areas of idleness within my supply chain? But as we know, there's really two elements when we talk about those that are causing problems. We've got all of the external elements. So we talk about tariffs, we talk about political areas. You know, we see Ukraine and the Russian war. We see the impact of that, of, you know, no-fly zones across the area. We see the tariffs and the way that elements are moving around. So there's a lot of re-movement of supply chains to come through Mexico, because at the moment, as we speak, that seems to be the most profitable area at the moment to pull things through. We still have an issue with talent. I mean, the latest survey in the manufacturing space, it doesn't really matter if we've created all of these factories in the USA, people just don't want to work in manufacturing jobs. They want to do something else. And so when you have those elements of void, you really need to bring up the amount of autonomous elements in your systems through AI, RPA, through agents, in order to close that gap that natural external forces are creating. Then there's all of the internal things, which we're going to talk about a little later, so I'm going to skip over those. But in essence, you know, we talk about data quality, data silos. A lot of organizations work in transactional silos and really just throw data over the fence to somebody else. We're trying to break those walls down in order to make that data do the work through those different areas and provide that clarity of information that everybody is after. Here's some examples that we have around, particularly when we start to mature our supply chains. These are benchmarks from SAP customers. And you can see just a couple of examples. You know, service levels increase. When you start to become a digital supply chain, you can then start to move 5 to 10 points in your customer service levels. And it also can hit your bottom line. So you don't need to have as much inventory available to you. If you have that visibility and agility built into your supply chains, you can then see some of the reductions that we have. And as you can see, 163 million saving on a capita per $1 billion of revenue. So it is a new area of enterprise management, and agents and AI is driving that. The way that you interact with systems is changing. We've all seen the way that Genie interacts with Databricks. SAP has its own digital assistants called Joule. We also are very capable of our processes with our applications. And this is where, in the bit in the middle, is clarity of data, granularity of data in a meaningful time. And this is where SAP and Databricks have come into partnership in order to fill that middle gap and provide good quality data that enables you to execute your agents at the top level, but also pull through the business processes that sit in the bottom. So we give an example around the system of agents. Now, the complexity of agents increases exponentially when an agent is talking to another agent to ask its things. So what we're seeing is that we will move into the system of agents where Joule, our digital assistant, will become an orchestration agent, which will then execute other agents available to us. We've signed up for the Google A2A consortium to make sure that we follow the standards that everybody else is in the business. We then also see executing on tools and data sets. So this is where, again, the Databricks element comes into the SAP world, and utilizing the delta share that we have with Databricks is then to be able to use that information to augment the business processes that we have in our systems. So as you can see, we're seeing from a Joule perspective, and it's just a pure time and motion study element, is we're seeing a 30% increase in productivity. We're seeing a shift from somebody in supply chain is an SAP expert in supply chain management to a citizen of a supply chain management process. So I don't need to understand the transactional codes that live inside SAP. I can ask it a natural language question in supply chain to then execute what I want, which then is now opening up resource availability across the globe for people being, they don't necessarily need to be SAP experts, but then can hit the ground running with business processes. So in the last 3 slides, I'll just give you an example of where we're at. I mean, SAP as an organization, we're going to have our own capability of agents, where we're planning those elements into sort of like looking back at understanding what's going on from a reflection perspective, looking at, have I made the right choice with the reasoning, and then collaborating. Because from a supply chain perspective, the complexity of your supply chain has increased exponentially. There's a lot of more trading partners available. We need to extend our supply chain out into my tier 1, tier 2 suppliers to understand their green credentials, for instance, or have they got the capability of delivering what I want in a meaningful time. So just to give you an example of an agent that we have, this is called a supervisory agent that sits in the manufacturing space. It's listening to alerts that are coming through and making recommendations on what should be available. And then a service dispatch agent, very similar. It's offering a best fit for available resources that we have to then make sure that I'm being most efficient and my first-time fix rates are increased. So short and sweet, thank you very much for staying awake. I will now pass over, and then we'll continue on with the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. Good job. So I want to, and thanks, Andy, for kind of presenting that perspective. It's really great insights on all the SAP's new capabilities. I want to take a step back and really talk about the foundation of all of this, right, which is data, and how data really plays a role, and how legacy capabilities have really had gaps in tackling with some of the challenges that we have today. So I'll kind of walk you through some of these, right? So a lot of the customers that we work with, we often find them to have at least 4 disconnected planning tools. They're having tons of analytical systems between data warehouses, data marts, spreadsheets, you name it, right? And they're constantly trying to figure out, right, if one system gets updated, how does that data then move on to the other systems? And no one's working off the same source of truth. The second thing is, while organizations are figuring out how to keep these systems in sync, they're missing out on new signals, right? So think about video from warehouses, or even if you think about text from customer reviews, right? They're missing out on these signals that can really help them figure out how to optimize their supply chains. Limited accuracy of predictions is another one, right, which is really directly tied to how good your forecasting is, or if you can do forecasting at scale. And last but not least, right, there's this disconnect between retailer and supplier collaboration, right? We're still using proprietary protocols like SFTP, we're using inconsistent formats, right? There's a big disconnect, and that really causes delays in how data is being shared. Now, that's really doubled down when we look at service, right? Data issues, whether it's governance, integration, ETL, become major issues when it comes to supply chain and AI adoption. So let's kind of tie that to supply chain and the key issues revolving around supply chain. So there's three different things, there are three different points that really where data friction plays a big role. The first one is around managing supplier risk, right? So data visibility is critical to that. So let's take an example of, let's say, a produce buyer, right? A sudden drought jeopardizes pepper crops in Mexico. And if you only see that risk months later, what are you doing? You're looking for last-minute vendors. You are now paying spot pricing, which is really going to erode your margins. But if you had the ability to stream data, if you have the ability to get access to that data quickly, if you were able to extract some of those latest and greatest signals like weather data, social media chatter, supplier performance, you can spot that drought closer to real time, right? And you can lock in alternate sources and keep your business running as usual. Second is inventory and demand management, right? So demand management ends up being one of the most common use cases that we see with our customers when it comes to supply chain, right? It's really an entry point for our companies. But that demand forecast gets propagated to at least 20 departments across the organization. So how do we ensure that everyone is working off the same copy of data, the same version of data, the same source of truth? So that ends up being a challenge. And last but not least, we're still seeing hours and days of delay between how retailers and suppliers share data, right? So think about direct store delivery, right, of perishable goods. So a few hours can make a big difference between a fresh avocado landing on the shelf or a bruised one landing in the markdown aisle, right? So that is the difference between your margins and how profitable an organization is. So let's start with the first culprit, which is essentially data silos, right? So in every stage, suppliers, logistics, distributors, retailers, even how we collect feedback, all this information is living in disconnected systems, right? So how do we break down these silos? How do we bring all of this data together and kind of really build that unified, coherent view? And that's where the Databricks plus SAP partnership is a complete game changer for our industry, right? So we're able to combine your ERP data from SAP with Databricks' ability to really extract data from any and every source that you have in the ecosystem, whether it's structured or unstructured, and really give you that ability to build that single unified data layer across your enterprise, right? And it doesn't just stop at building that data layer. You automatically get this state-of-the-art governance layer to control and access your data, right, which is Unity Catalog. And you're not just stuck in reporting mode, right? That was the days of the past, right? You can now do advanced analytics, you can do AI ML, think about forecasting, you can even build specialized AI agents, right? So Andy talked a lot about the agents that these applications are coming embedded with, but we have agents living all across our enterprise. So how do we bring them all together to make them work together and cohesively? And all this happens on a single source of truth. So this is an example from an inventory and demand management side, right? If you're a gold manufacturer who's regularly seeing their forecast be incorrect by 30%, right? Or regularly off by 30%. And this isn't usual, right? We just haven't been that great as you know, within this consumer goods space and actually in retailer space and actually doing really good forecasts. And this creates a lot of confusion, a lot of mistrust across the organization. And here's a survey about talking about that demand forecasting accuracy is actually one of the most common and the most prevalent issue when it comes to supply chain and managing your supply chains. And it's a foundation for so many downstream processes, right? So think about inventory levels, logistics planning, customer service. If you don't have your forecasts right, it makes everything else downstream harder and more expensive. And if you move that needle, if you get those accuracy even a little better, 10 to 20%, that has a major impact on your bottom line, right? All the way from reduction in inventory cost as well as increased revenue. So what's the conundrum, right? Why haven't legacy systems figured this out, right? So organizations are often stuck between two options, right? You can either go for high speed and low accuracy. So what does that mean, right? That means that you end up limiting what you forecast on. So you think about forecasting at an aggregate level, maybe only picking a few categories to forecast on, maybe using a promo group or a week or a market level. But we know everything doesn't behave the same underneath, right? So some products, some SKUs sell differently, some stores behave differently based on the region they're in, and that has an impact on your forecast accuracy. But when you try to go for high accuracy, these legacy systems are not able to scale, and you end up with very slow speed, which is not optimal. But Databricks solves this, right? You don't have the scalability issue. You can scale this out. You can go extremely down to granular levels of high levels of calculation, and you can do it very quickly. You can do it in short periods of time. And we have a great customer story regarding this, which is public. It's Albert Heijn, which is a banner under the Ahold, which is a grocer. And they run 1 billion forecasts a day on Databricks. And they do it across, they do a 50-day rolling forecast for every store and every SKU. And they do it in a couple of hours, right? And this really allows them to have great precision and really get ahead of things before they actually happen. And we're accelerating this type of development for our customers, right? So you have this QR code, you can go to it. It actually is a GitHub link that will give you the entire solution accelerator to get started on this, right? So this is really going to help your data science or data engineering teams to not have to start from scratch and really accelerate development and going from development to production. But we are not stopping there, right? Databricks is a full-blown enterprise data and AI platform. So what we're going to allow you to do is take it a step further. You can build specialized, cohesive agents and deploy them on Databricks or your infrastructure of choice and make some of these different things come together. So you can talk to your enterprise data. That's Genie, of course. We all heard about it. But you can also have it do other things, like go pull procedures from unstructured data, like PDF files. You can have it do things like submit order requests. You can do automation and have it based on the inputs it's getting. You can actually have it do create orders. You can call external APIs. You can pull commodity prices. You can pull data around economic indicators, right? And you can have all of this working together with a human in the loop. And eventually, I think the nirvana that we want to get to is do this in a more automated way. And that's going to help you answer questions like, what are the exact steps to escalate a supplier quality incident, right? So this is going to go to a vector index, and it's going to go pull, look at your documents, and going to pull that answer for you from there. Now, coming back to the last thing, which is really around collaboration, the pandemic exposed how fragile supply chains can be, and also highlighted the power of sharing data between retailers and suppliers as a way to increase resilience. And so it's not really just a nice to have, it's become really a necessity. And we have Delta sharing, obviously, out of the box, and that's really opening doors in how retailers and suppliers share data. So we have over 4,000 data sources available via Delta sharing, which is an open protocol, and includes major providers like Walmart Scintilla, Circana, Crisp, and Engine. And the beauty of the sharing that Databricks provides is that as soon as the data is updated at the source, it is immediately available on your side. So what does that mean? That means fresh forecasts and fresher analytics and more up-to-date analytics, right? And you don't have to do any kind of complex integrations, ETLs, or even using any fancy APIs. So what does that mean for your bottom line, right? The three things that we talked about, kind of going back to those that we talked about initially, was number one, we're seeing about up to 5% improvement in on time and full, right? So that means more deliveries on time and full in the quantities that were ordered. We're also seeing up to 30% improvement in demand forecasting accuracy, right? And one metric that we usually look at when we work with our customers is inventory turnover rate, and we're seeing that improve significantly. And last but not least, we are projecting about a 40% improvement in out of stocks with better retailer supply collaboration. So think about how quickly you can learn, as a supplier or retailer, what the state of data is across the board. And this is a $2 trillion documented global problem, right? So retailer and supply collaboration can put a real dent into it. So with that, I want to welcome Dee on stage. Dee Fitzgerald is the Head of Analytics, Chief Data Officer at Danone. I'd love to hear from her, some of her experiences, both at Danone as well how supply chain is making a difference. Sit down.
I'm okay to stand.
You already stand?
Are you okay to stand?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think it's the least we could do for these diehards who stayed. I think thank you. The last session of the last day of this, great. So thank you all for staying. We'll make it a
Nice to have you. We're really excited, and I'm really honored for me to be up here with you, Dee. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me a bit about Danone, right? I'll tell you a little bit of my own experience, like Dan and Danone, right? We call it Dan in the U.S. It is a staple in my house. It goes in my protein drinks every morning, the 15-gram protein ones you have. So I love it. But tell me a little about yourself. Tell me a little about what you do at Danone and your role and how it's evolved over the years.
Yeah. Great. So I'm Dee Fitzgerald. I live in the US, but work for the company. We call it in France, Danone. It's referred to Danone here. In Spain, it's Danone. So talk about data management and calling things differently. And I'm the head of data and analytics and AI at Danone. Danone is a consumer goods company, food and beverage. We have products such as Activia, Oikos, Evian water. We also have an area, so we do premium dairy, plant-based, so Silk, you may have seen on the shelf. That's one of our key products. But we also have specialized nutrition for early life. Happy Family is a key brand of ours for baby food and other life science and health. So we try to help those in need of specific dietary requirements, or also for if not that any of us will have to deal with this, but as you age, you need more protein, you need more diet supplements. So, and Danone as a company, our mission is to bring health through food to as many people as possible. And we're doing that through many different, we have a social journey. We have about 90,000 Danoners, and we're all looking to help bring good to people through food, through beverages. And we do that in everything we do, especially now in our data and our AI journey going forward.
That's good to know. And in your role?
So in my role, I have the privilege of heading the four-letter, very complex topic called data. Whenever I ask somebody to spell data, I think they should say superfragilexpialidocious from Mary Poppins. I think it's hysterical. But also, so all data platform capabilities, all data product capabilities, data management, data governance. And then, of course, we've always been doing AI. But since the hype of last year, you could say I've formally become much more involved in the AI journey. What that means is, so I have, in addition to what I shared, I'd say two key topics that are relevant for today. I lead two, let's say, governance bodies that are taken over through the business. So one is data governance, where we're pushing data ownership on standards, definitions of our data. And the other one is AI governance. So these are executives from the functions who are responsible for driving our AI strategy for Danone forward.
That's great. I love to hear a good governance story. That's great.
Got many of them.
So let's start at the beginning, right? You talked about data a little bit. I know data is very close to my heart. It's usually the most conversations I'm having, even to this day, is how to set up your data foundation, how do you have a data strategy? So, there's the cliche, right? Hey, you can't really have AI without good data. So what aspects of your data strategy and how does that change and, in order to tackle the AI innovation and supply chain in general, right? Or AI innovation in supply chain, and how has that impacted what are some of your transformations?
So I think it's really helped amplify the whole need for good data. I think the whole garbage in, garbage out concept is not new, but having the need for AI has really helped elevate the importance of data governance. So all of these technologies that have been shared just today, those are absolutely key. Having the strongest, most robust, most flexible data platform is required. But I'd say on top of that, What is never really talked about is what about the data standards and the data definitions to make that AI come to life better. So what do I mean by that? Something as simple as units of measure, okay? Is an each an each? Is a case in each? And you'll find at a global company such as Danone, we have very similar, as you shared, very siloed capabilities, siloed, fragmented systems. We also have centralized and high, and robust systems. We also are a big fan of Excel, yeah? But so people can interpret data differently. And so what we're pushing for is really driving data standards so that when you are looking at fill rate and service levels, you are looking at the similar definitions. That sounds quite simple, but it takes a lot of influencing and it takes a lot of orchestration and coordination.
Yeah, is that something that governance body that you talk about is kind of in charge of?
Yeah, so right now we have these two separate, but at some point we'll probably bring them together, which is how are we managing and governing our data most effectively? So we have a team of, and they're all from the business. They're from finance, from supply chain, and supply chain is the most populated team. They probably have 5 compared to every one from other functions. Just in enabling what the standards are. And then we're bringing to them these tools and these capabilities to really bring data governance to life. So the Unity catalog,
sure.
How do they document the business glossary definitions, the metadata definitions, the standards, et cetera, et cetera. And then through that, we're also using the AI committee, which will then be docked into this. But in addition, it's how are we being responsible with our AI? So what are we managing ethics correctly? Are we following policies and standards? But then let's also highlight the big overarching topic is there value to what we're trying to do? We don't do AI for the sake of AI. Yep. We dock it into the business strategy of supply chain to ensure that we are mobilizing and accelerating that value forward.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it kind of leads into my next question. So you talked about hype, and the hype's been around for 2 years now, right? And it's not dying, right? And there's a lot of FUD and a lot of different expectations. So when we think about pilots to production, or pilots to scale, or POCs to scale, right? Everyone's doing pilots. Everyone's trying to put these agents together, or even just classic AI, right? So what are some of your experiences of just lesson learned? How do Danone or just organizations kind of go from that pilot stage to
so I'd say we've probably been on a journey, as most of other companies. I'd say we started with let's just experiment and let's learn from those experimentations. And then we bring in much more rigor with our governance in ensuring that, again, how has the use case been architected? Is it scalable? Is it something that can be repeatable? And is it really something that we can support? Because you also want to make sure that from a support perspective, it's there. And what is the cost of actually doing this, right? So is this going to be more costly than the value that we provide? And we really hold the business accountable for driving those answers and bringing those answers to life. And one thing I will share, we now have a much, let's say, more robust governance that we're bringing forward. And one of the, there's a great article that people from Cambridge and Columbia have written, and it's called the theory framework. So how do you take this concept, this idea that is very theoretical, and bring it to life through different stage gates to impact and to scale? And we're incorporating that into our program methodology to ensure that that is followed. And we have a forum where we don't talk about the use case, the business talks about the use case, has to explain. We say no ROI, no AI. So we have a hashtag for that one, and so people come with that. But understanding that we also have to identify that it's a learning process. The ROI may also be soft and may be qualitative. And also, as mentioned in supply chain, it's very much about being more productive, being more efficient, doing things better, faster, at a higher quality. So we may not be able to say, oh, I'm going to increase my sales by X million, but we will be able to say we are improving the productivity, and then also the feeling and the satisfaction of our Danoners.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So I love stories, obviously, from a use case perspective, because I think it's a great way to connect technology to what's actually happening in real life. So I'd love to kind of hear anything around supply chain or else, right? Where you've taken a use case and that's really helped add value from a business perspective?
Yeah. So I can talk more about one, and then we have several others that are in the works. But one with our CMP, our procurement team, we call it Procure Hub GPT. We've partnered with Databricks, Microsoft, et cetera, and it's a capability that is actually just, again, improving the efficiency and the relationships. So efficiency, so instead of our procurement team having to look for these contracts and these files, we now can ask through agents, through the agentic framework, and it provides answers. It's also improving supplier engagement. So the performance of our relationship with our supplier, we're now able to communicate better with them. We actually are very proud. I can't tell you the name of the award, but it won a real nice, it's a procurement award globally for one of the best AI use cases that was submitted. Very proud about that. Procure Hub GPT is what it's called. And the other thing, we're doing a lot with customer service, with manufacturing, and we're calling them companions. How can I create companions with those on the shop floor to be better? To improve their day-to-day activities. And again, this one's tricky because a lot of these, at least in my world, a lot of these shop floor employees don't have access to digital capabilities. They're on the floor, they're producing. But what can we do to create that interface, that minimum viable interface that allows them to know and alerts them if we believe there's going to be an outage on one of the lines, the production lines. If we feel that we're overproducing or underproducing, what kind of alerting capabilities can be. So we're doing these companions, we're doing it for our demand planners as well, for our inventory analysts, for our customer service reps, just to help them be better at what they do today.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Actually, I feel like this is a trend, like something GPT as a name application. It's working with Mondelez, and they have a snack GPT. So
yes,
it's
yes.
kind of
very creative.
Maybe there's
very
a yogurt
creative.
GPT coming up soon for you guys. Talk about a little bit of collaboration. I know we talked earlier. I talked a little bit about retailer supplier, the data sharing aspect of things. We were really happy with the announcement with Walmart supporting Delta sharing a couple of months ago. How is that working? Like, how are you enabling that kind of collaboration between retailers and suppliers? Is that something that you guys are already either using Delta sharing or other protocols, or thinking about using Delta sharing, or how has that evolved for you?
Yeah, so short answer is yes. How we're doing it is step by step, and it's again, it's through technology. It's allowing us to have the ability to share and access each other's insights and information, but it's also, again, partnerships. Our sales team having great, let's say, relationships and captaincy with the Walmart buyers, and working with them, because what we are doing is we're not just sharing the data, but we're trying to share how we would use that data to help grow, not Danone, but the category, because they don't really care if we grow. They do, but they also care that the category grows and grows through the retailer.
Sure.
So we have been, let's say, prototyping capabilities together, different retailers, but in terms of how we can share that data, but also the insights behind it, and what are we doing to help drive those insights for our products, but also for the category.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I think that's one of the things that I personally like about Delta sharing, just from a technology perspective, is the ability that's not just data, right? It's all the other insights that you can package with it, so that the one receiving it knows what to do with the data, right? So I'll wrap it up, right? I mean, we talked about a lot of announcements over the last 2 days. There's a lot happening in the AI space, whether it's Databricks or other organizations. I just want to hear from you, like, is there anything specific that's top of mind for you that's emerging that you think is going to really make a difference from a consumer-facing industry supply chain standpoint in the next 3 to 5 years? Anything that you think is really going to revolutionize this space or make a difference? AI or data related?
I think what I really like, what I saw over the last couple of days here, was how you bring data, how you bring AI into a self-service model. So some of the announcements that were shared in terms of designing, in terms of, like you talked about, Delta sharing, et cetera, that is going to be where the game changing takes place. Because, again, from my perspective, the more the people on the jobs are actually leveraging these capabilities and working, utilizing these capabilities, utilizing this data, the more impact it'll be. And so that is where I see, again, more in the how. We're doing a lot of exciting stuff in, and I would say in the life science space, and partnering more with scientific companies, with research companies, just to see if we could share data and then also share insights to really help us identify the next big, let's say, trend. We talk about, gluten-free. You talk about soy or dairy-free, gut health. Those are the areas that will really help change and help, let's say, improve the livelihoods of us until we're into the ages of 80 to 100.
Yeah, no, that's amazing to hear. So I really appreciate everybody. Appreciate you, Dee, for being here with us. It's been an honor. Hopefully you guys learned a lot. We'll share the link and the deck as well later. But thank you for attending, guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.